Herman Bavinck, born in December of 1854 and then died in July 1921, was a Dutch Calvinist theologian and churchman. He was a significant scholar in the Calvinist tradition alongside Abraham Kuyper, B.B. Warfield, and Geerhardus Vos. Hey guys, Joe here, back to the Word today with a fun video. Who was Herman Bavinck? The man, his works, and his theology. A little summary of Neo-Calvinism and the Reformed faith. I'm excited to get into this video. All of the content for this video is time-stamped below, so feel free to jump ahead to the section that most interests you. In this video, I'm going to cover specifically Bavinck, the man. Who was Herman Bavinck? 3 popular myths about Herman Bavinck, Bavinck's theology, Dutch Neo-Calvinism, just a short summary here. I'm going to do a longer video in the future on my channel as well. And also Bavinck's notable works, the big rocks. So why this topic? Why this video? I recently, in November of 2023, bought the Deluxe edition of Reformed Dogmatics, Herman Bavinck's magisterial magnum opus work. Over 3,000 pages of historical and systematic theology. And so it got me thinking, why should you read Herman Bavinck? Why do so many people talk about Herman Bavinck? And it just set me on this course, and I put these videos together with the results of the things that I found as I was investigating and wanted to share with all of you. So I'm learning with all of you. If there's insights, things that you know about him, I would love to learn with you in the description or the comments below this video. I also have a playlist linked in the description of this video, and we'll make mentions of other videos throughout that I've done. If you want to go see other things on my channel that I've done for Herman Bavinck. So with that, before we get into the content of this video, this channel is Back to the Word. My channel exists to equip and encourage you to read the Bible, good books, and have conversations that truly matter, and I'm excited for the conversation today. If you're into that sort of content, please like, subscribe, hit that notification bell so other people see these videos and you don't miss a video when new ones come out. All right, time to get into the content for this video. Bavinck, the man. Who was Herman Bavinck? The following bio factoids I've pulled from hermanbavinck.org. Also John Bolt's Introduction to Reformed Dogmatics. And then I've also used Wikipedia and other online sources in a few places to just fill in and flesh out a few gaps here and there. All right, starting off. You'll see my notes on the side as we go through. Feel free to pause them to get more in depth. I will read some of them, but summarize some of them as well. All right, Herman Bavinck, born in December of 1854 and then died in July 1921, was a Dutch Calvinist theologian and churchman. He was a significant scholar in the Calvinist tradition alongside Abraham Kuyper, B.B. Warfield, and Geerhardus Vos. Note right here, he's not to be confused with his father, Jan Bavinck, or his nephew, J.H. Bavinck, who was a Dutch pastor, theologian, and missionary to Indonesia. So J.H. Bavinck has written at least 2 or 3 things that you may see published that have been translated, and so I just don't want you to get those confused. We are talking in this video about Herman Bavinck, the one who wrote Reformed Dogmatics and many other works that are now being published in English as they have been translated from Dutch. All right, back to Herman. His father was a minister in the Dutch Christian Reformed Church that had succeeded from the National Dutch Reformed Church, which was the state church in the Netherlands, just 20 years before Herman Bavinck's birth. After graduating high school, Bavinck attended 1 year at Kampen Theological Seminary. So that was a Dutch Christian Reformed church school. So that was the school for the denomination that his father belonged to. And so after attending there just a year, he transferred for his studies and finished his studies at the University of Leiden. We'll talk more about that later in this video. He graduated in 1880 from Leiden with his doctorate after he completed his dissertation on the ethics of Zwingli and was granted the Doctor of Theology degree cum laude. Upon graduation, he pastored a Dutch Christian Reformed church for a year and a half before becoming a professor at Kampen Theological School at the age of 28. And there he taught Dogmatics, Encyclopedia of Sacred Theology, Ethics, and Philosophy for 20 years, until after repeated invitations to join the faculty under Abraham Kuyper, Bavinck accepted and moved to the Free University in Amsterdam in 1902. And so Dr. Kuyper actually succeeded Dr. Kuyper as the professor in dogmatics. This was about the time Dr. Kuyper took on being Prime Minister of the Netherlands, and so Herman Bavinck replaced him as the teacher of dogmatics at the Free University in Amsterdam. He arrived at the Free University well-credentialed, well-respected, and with his first edition of the Reformed Dogmatics already in publication. And so he would remain at the Free University for the rest of his career. A little bit about his influence abroad as he was a teacher. In 1892, he addressed the Alliance of the Reformed Churches holding the Presbyterian system, which met in Toronto, Canada. In 1908, he visited the United States. He met with the famous professor B.B. Warfield and other scholars and gave the Stone Lectures on the Philosophy of Revelation at the Princeton Theological Seminary. This is when they still would have been theologically sound before this would have been old Princeton, as some like to call it, before the new Princeton, and they became more liberal and drifted away from the Christian faith. One of Bavinck's leading disciples was Dr. Louis Berkhof. He's a professor of systematic theology and president of Calvin Theological Seminary from 1926 to 1944. And so Berkhof relied heavily on Bavinck for his work, Systematic Theology, which is published by Banner of Truth, very popular. And so many know Bavinck because of his influence on Louis Berkhof. Other tidbits: in 1911, he was elected a senator in the Netherlands, and then World War I spanned from 1914 to 1918 during Bavinck's lifetime, and then Bavinck died on the 29th of July in 1921 in Amsterdam. A few more factoids that I wanted to share with all of you. At one point in his career, he was a magazine editor. In 1900, he took on being a magazine editor for this magazine called The Trumpet. And the articles he penned really showed that he was not afraid of controversy and to say what he thought. And he actually has a comment there that I quoted about someone who, if you don't like controversy, you should stay away from the press. He says it's one of the most tense and busy things he has ever done in his life. Also, family life. Bavinck did marry, and he was married to his wife Joanna, and then they had one daughter who also had children as well. And Bavinck's wife was notable in her own right. I have a short write-up there you can pause and read. But after her husband's passing, she continued many of his endeavors regarding women's rights. She also pushed for his works to be translated and published. And she also knew her spot in the promotion of Calvinism, and was a part of the Second International Conference of Calvinists in 1934. The other notable factoid about Bavinck is towards the end of his life, he was grieved over the division in the church and the division in the world. It says Bavinck was greatly grieved over the divisions and constant struggles in the church. In 1888, he delivered a remarkable address entitled The Catholicity of Christendom and Church. It showed his broad vision of the church. He also, Bavinck warned against the separatist and sectarian inclinations and against the temptation to turn away from the public life. We're going to see this as we continue through this video. I've also done my other video on why read Reformed Dogmatics, gets into some of this tension. But in Bavinck's day, there was lots of people who wanted to, in the church, who were like, let's just separate from the culture, let's go to America, let's get away, let's just be in ourselves and let's let the world go away. But then there's others who embrace the culture and were saying, thought Christianity wasn't relevant at all and that it shouldn't be followed. And so Bavinck tries to hold both of those together. How do we live now where we are, be Reformed Orthodox Christians, but also engage the world in a way that wins them to Christ and represents what the Bible teaches. Although he spoke movingly about the Catholicity of the church, he still remained thoroughly reformed in his theology. He didn't hesitate to engage in dialogue to show opponents of the Christian faith why their arguments were wrong and unpersuasive. This man was very mentally sharp. He knew the worldviews that other people had. He knew the modern culture from studying at Leiden from firsthand experience, and he knew how the Bible was better, and he knew where they were flawed. And so while he was charitable when he was showing them their flaws, he ultimately showed how they were wrong and how what the Bible taught was correct in many different disciplines. So, all right, moving on. 3 popular myths about Herman Bavinck. I couldn't do this video without bringing these up and sharing about them. So these insights come from J.'s Eglinton's critical biography of Bavinck. He put this section particularly in a blog post that's online, and I've linked in the description of this video. But here are the 3 myths that you may run into as you think about reading Bavinck and getting into some of his works. First, that he was a diamond in the rough, found by his teacher after he was thought unworthy of education by his father. This myth is just not true. Bavinck's father did not have access to a great education. He was trained in a certain discipline and then became a minister, and he wanted his children to receive an education. Education in this time was costly. It was something that was only afforded to those who were really bright and the highest in society. And so it was a focus for Bavinck's father to have his children get an education. And so it's thought that maybe his father, there's a rumor that's spread from 1 or 2 stories where Bavinck's father may not have thought his son was going to make it and was going to actually be worthy of getting that extra education. But that's just not the truth. It's something he wanted for his children from the very beginning. Second myth is there was a national uproar over his transfer to a liberal university from his denominational seminary. Liberalism was creeping into different seminaries, different schools, different things. And so the university specifically had some of the best biblical scholars, but also those who were pushing forward in philosophy and science in ways that were departing from the Bible, departing from Christianity. And the Enlightenment era was going on. And so there's this point about this national uproar, which is just not true. Bavinck approached his father about going to the University of Leiden. His father said, please go to the denominational school, seminary for at least 1 year. He did that, and then he transferred because for whatever reason, there's many speculations, Bavinck wanted to see what the world believed, see all those disciplines from a front seat view, from hands-on experience. And so he was bright. He held on to the Reformed faith, wanted to remain orthodox, is super biblical in everything he writes. But there's this talk sometimes that when he made that move, denominational leaders as well as Bavinck's father were really upset and thought he might be leaving the faith. And that's just not true. The third myth I have to share is people will say, and you will hear this one even today, read him, but don't end up like him or take him too seriously because he died not believing what he taught. This is just not true. This rumor comes from the fact that towards the end of his life, he gave away all of his works of dogmatics that he had used to teach for a long time. And so the phrase that he used to give it away that others have recorded and talked about can be translated 2 different ways. Either 1, he's giving them away because he no longer believes them, or 2, he's giving them away because he no longer has use for them because he's no longer teaching dogmatics. And so and James Eglinton talks about the second one is far more plausible because of his beliefs and what he says all the way to the end of his life. It is true that he was pretty sad toward the end of his life. So he'd gone through World War I. World War II was getting ready to happen in the next couple years, and he could see, because of his involvement with the world, its disciplines, the modern worldview, and the Christian world, he really was grieved over the world his children and grandchildren were inheriting. And so he was saddened by that, but he did not leave the faith, as some often say. And so the point is, he held to his Orthodox, Reformed Christian beliefs all the way to the end of his life. He was saddened by what he saw in the world, and really was years ahead of his time when he could predict what was coming. But he did not leave the faith, and so you can read these works knowing he believed them all the way to the end of his life. Next section of the video, Bavinck's Theology, Dutch Neo-Calvinism summary. He is the Calvinistic Reformed theologian as you're getting into him, but there's a specific type of Calvinism that Bavinck taught and is known for. I'm doing a short summary of it right here in this video, but I'm going to do a longer video that is also linked in the description of this video, and cue the card in the top as well. So, Neo-Calvinism, the short summary here. It is not to be confused with New Calvinism, kind of Calvinism that was stirred up and became more popular in the West towards the 1970s, 80s, even 90s. With, think about Packer, J.I. Packer, John Piper, just those types of people. It's not New Calvinism, nor is it Hyper Calvinism, which is a certain type of Calvinism. It's Neo, N-E-O, Calvinism. So the short summary is this is a type of Calvinism first developed by Abraham Kuyper, also Dutch. We've already talked about him. And it's a flavor of Calvinism that emphasized the sovereignty of God over every area of life and really any discipline of life, and desires to understand what it means to be a Reformed Protestant under the tutelage of the Reformer of Geneva, but in a different cultural landscape than Calvin ever knew. Neo-Calvinism is looking at and saying, yes, the message of the gospel is soteriological. It's about saving us. We are saved. And they talk about the doctrines of grace. But beyond that, the context of that saving is the sovereignty of God over all areas of life. And this is really popular by the, think about this Neo-Calvinism quote by Abraham Kuyper that many of you may have heard. So this is what Dr. Abraham Kuyper says: there is not a square inch in the whole domain of our human existence over which Christ, who is sovereign over all, does not cry, mine. That is very much a Neo-Calvinist statement that all truth is God's truth. Nothing that we run into and discover as human beings is of our own invention, leaves God behind in the dust. He is over everything. Everything leads to him. All truth is God's truth type of statement. I've done a much longer video on this that you can get in the description of below. That will be on my channel as well. Next segment for this video, Bavinck's notable works, the big rocks. He's written many things that are currently even being translated from Dutch into English. I have the big ones here that I'm going to share with you. Feel free to pause the video if you want to read more in depth. I'm going to summarize a lot of this as I'm going through. So first, he's most known for his works of Reformed Dogmatics, 4 volumes written, most recently published by Baker Academic in English in 2008, and the whole pages is over 3,024 pages of reading. So I have the edition history there of when it was published. He had a second edition that came out in 1906 and 1911, and then a third and fourth edition that followed. This is a great work of historical and systematic theology. Bavinck is known for going deep, being super intellectual, being very engaging philosophical arguments, being super biblical. I did a video much longer on my channel on why read Reformed Dogmatics. You should check out that video if you want to know more about it. Here are a few comments from others, from John Bolt, who actually edited that 4 volumes for Baker Academic. It says, Reformed Dogmatics is biblically and confessionally faithful, pastorally sensitive, challenging, and still relevant today, even just 100 years later after it was written. Bavinck's life and thought reflect a serious effort to be pious, orthodox, and thoroughly contemporary. To pietists fearful of the modern world on the one hand, and to critics of the orthodoxy skeptical about its continuing relevance on the other, Bavinck's example suggests a model answer, an engaging Trinitarian vision of Christian discipleship in God's world. So there's a good reasons to be checking it out. He holds both of those in tension. He's not someone who says live the way of Jesus and just get away from the world, nor is he someone who says become worldly and leave the Christianity behind. And so he engages the culture of the world with a Trinitarian vision of Christian discipleship in God's world. Also, some words from J.I. Packer, like Augustine, Calvin, and Edwards, Bavinck was a man of giant mind, vast learning, ageless wisdom, and great expository skill. And so he talks about having this first volume in print with the promise of the other four. So Reformed Dogmatics is quite the treasure. He says, Bavinck's magisterial Reformed Dogmatics remains after a century, after 100 years, the supreme achievement of its kind. And we should think about reading it, reading Bavinck and his theology. Moving on, Reformed Dogmatics, abridged in one volume. Maybe you think 3,000 pages is a lot of reading. How can I get access to this man in smaller volumes? So that's 4 volumes by John Bolt has taken all 4 and abridged them into one. And this was published in 2011 by Baker Academic, 864 pages. And so he's taken it, abridged the work in one volume that offers students, pastors, and lay readers an accessible summary of Bavinck's master work. So this is one way you can get Bavinck without reading over 3,000 pages. Just one note, I have heard some people online say that they wish John Bolt, when he did the abridgment, had notated in some way what was Bavinck and what was him summarizing Bavinck. So as you get that abridgment and get into it, worth getting, worth reading for those who might not tackle all 4 volumes. Just know that going in, that John Bolt does not kind of augment where he's quoting Bavinck's directly and where he's summarizing him throughout. The next one, this is really worth checking out. The big rocks, we're talking about The Wonderful Works of God Are Reasonable Faith. It was most recently published in 2019 under the title The Wonderful Works of God by Westminster Seminary Press at 695 pages. This is his most known English book and work of theology. And so Bavinck wrote his own non-academic abridgment of the Dogmatics for use by churches, families, and individuals. So you have John Bolt's abridgment of the 4 volumes, but this is Bavinck's own abridgment of his dogmatic work for the layperson, for the bookshelves of families, churches, and church members. And so he did that for us, and it was published in the United States first as The Wonderful Works of God by Eerdmans in 1956, and most recently The Wonderful Works of God by Westminster Seminary Press. This is his most popular work in English and worth reading for various reasons. Here's some of the comments from others. From Brian Matson says, this single volume systematic theology represents Bavinck's own distillation of his 4-volume magnum opus, The Reformed Dogmatics. It's not an abridgment of the 4 volumes. It is rather Bavinck's fresh restatement of his dogmatic work for a lay audience. He goes on to say everything that dissuades people from reading the Dogmatics, the use of Latin, Greek, other words and languages, deep interactions with contemporary theologians, lengthy walks through historical doctrine are all minimized, and what shines through The Wonderful Works of God is his ultimate reliance on Scripture for his theology from Bavinck. And so those are removed. It's his own abridgment for the lay audience. Also, Joel Beakey says this, Herman Bavinck gave the modern church a theology of the living God. He says the Wonderful Works of God is more than an abridged version of Reform's dogmatics. It is a fresh restatement of the same truths clothed in plain language for popular use. Really good statement right there. I will say this, I am planning in the future to read through all 4 volumes of the Reformed Dogmatics, and at the same time I hope to read The Wonderful Works of God along with it. The theology is the same in both, but I've heard people talk about the insights and how he talks about them in both are a bit different. And so to fully get what Bavinck is talking about with his theology, I'm going to plan to read both, because in The Wonderful Works of God, you have his abridgment spoken for a different audience, the person sitting in the pew, the family bookshelf at home. He was writing to them with the same theological background, whereas in the Reformed Dogmatics, you have him writing everything for the pastor, the theologian, the academy, and the seminary student. And so I'm looking forward to learning from both theology is the same, writing to different audience, teased out in different ways. And I'm looking to experience that and read that in the future. And I'm sure I'll do videos on those sorts of things as I get to those. All right, moving on. Another big rock, Reformed Ethics. There are 3 volumes planned for this. This has come recently in the last couple of years. You see there published the first one 2019, 2021, and we're still waiting on volume 3. The point is, theologians for a long time have talked about this connection between theology, how God speaks, the words about God and what he does in the world and his deeds, which is covered in Reformed Dogmatics, but then also our response, our works, how do we walk the Christian life? And that is known more or less in ethics. So theology is always tied to ethics. And so in Bavinck, they recently discovered this, that he was working on volumes on Reformed ethics. And so it's being put into print in English for the first time, translated from Dutch. And so it follows the same method and explores the ethical and spiritual dimensions of key doctrines beyond those of Reformed dogmatics. In it, Bavinck mines the moral teachings of the early church and the medieval and Puritan spirituality while addressing a variety of topics, offering scholars, pastors, and students Bavinck's mature reflections on ethical issues. So I think this is not just the theology, ethics from the Reformed Dogmatics, but he's doing some of his similar work that he does in Reformed Dogmatics with historical theology in the area of ethics. I'm looking forward to getting these volumes and reading them as well. There's many other smaller works I want to say here that are being translated or have been translated. And so he wrote not only on theology, yes, he taught theology, the Encyclopedia of Theology, also psychology, science, and different things. But Bavinck also wrote on Christian politics and education, creation versus evolution, psychology, and the family. And so here are some of the works I got from just searching online. There may be more out there, and I would love to know your favorites if you're watching this video. But Bavinck has wrote works on the Christian family, essays on religion, science, and society, Saved by Grace, the Holy Spirit's work in calling and regeneration, Herman Bavinck on preaching and preachers, the Christian worldview, the sacrifice of praise, what is Christianity, guidebook for instruction in the Christian religion, philosophy of revelation, a new annotated edition, Christianity and science, and I'm sure you can find more as well. Also, I want to note there's 2 really good books on Herman Bavinck, and there's more out there you could find as well, but here are 2 that I know that are good that I wanted to recommend. One, Bavinck on the Christian life, following Jesus in faithful service. This is a series by Crossway, and John Bolt is the one who wrote this volume, particularly on Bavinck for Crossway in 2015. And then also Bavinck, a critical biography by James Eglinton, came out in 2020 by Baker Academic. I have plans to get that and would love to share that on my channel in the future as well, and know that there's a wealth of information there about Bavinck. So with that, end of the video right here. I want to know first, did you make it to the end of the video? This was a long one. I hope you learned a lot and this has been encouraging to you. And this type of study, I love doing this and just sharing with people what I learned and what I got out of it, and continue to learn about God and other things as well. If you did make it this far, I'd love to hear about that in the comments. So did you make it to the end of this video? I'd also like to know, what did you learn or what did I miss? So did you learn something about Bavinck in this video? What was the favorite tidbit that you learned? Or did I miss something? You knew something about him, or you know something about him that you'd love to share with me? I'd love to learn with all of you guys as well. So with that, this is Back to the Word. I'm linking all my Bavinck stuff in a playlist that's in the description for this video below. If you want to continue, I do book reviews and other things on this channel, and so I'd love to have you like, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you don't miss a video. When you hit like, it allows this video to go to others and helps out the algorithm to spread this information to others as well. So with that, until next time, continue to read, treasure, follow the Word. God bless, and I'll see you guys soon.